The roof appeared only when the wind bowed low enough to show it, an angled shadow half buried beneath drifts. The old way station, or what was left of it. Caleb slowed first. Not from fear, Nora could tell, but because men who've survived too long on the trail never walk straight into shelter. They wait. They listen. They ask the storm what it's hiding. He raised 2 fingers. Stop. Nora froze, rope digging into her waist, little Owen bundled so tight against her chest she could barely feel his breath. Please breathe. A board creaked inside the cabin, not from wind. Caleb shifted his weight, hand resting near the loop of rope at his hip instead of the gun. He angled his body to shield her again. Habit, not heroism. The kind of instinct a man learns after burying too many things he once tried to protect. He moved first, boots crushing the crusted snow with a muted snap. Nora followed, her pulse hammering too loud. If someone was inside, if it was them. Caleb reached the door, bent low, pressed an ear to the wood. Nothing but the churn of the storm and a faint hiss of dying coals. He jerked his chin toward the frame. Move. Nora tightened her grip on Owen and braced herself. Caleb wrapped his gloved hand around the door's iron ring and twisted. Locked. He slid the rope from his shoulder, wound it twice around the handle and leaned back, muscles straining. The door groaned, nails squealing as the frame tore loose. Quiet enough for a man, loud as sin to Nora's ears. The moment the door slid open, something cold and metallic clicked behind them. Don't take another step. The voice was sharp, older, with an edge of someone who'd survived too many winters by pulling the trigger before asking the question. Caleb didn't turn. He lifted both hands, slow. Nora angled just enough to see the shotgun's twin barrels aimed right at Caleb's back. Marta Soto. Hair gray as the frost, eyes dark as stove ash, coat patched from decades of storms. She held the shotgun without shaking. Mija, Marta said to Nora, though her gaze stayed fixed on Caleb. Tell that tall sombra he steps 1 inch and I scatter him across my floor. Nora swallowed. Her voice cracked. He helped us. Plenty of men help until they don't. Marta's stare slid to Owen. Something softened. The baby. Dios mío. Bring him inside. Caleb stepped aside so Nora could enter first. He didn't speak, didn't gesture. He simply made space, the way mountains make space for the wind, unyielding, silent, necessary. Inside, the way station was only half a room. Snow pushed through gaps in the boards. The stove glowed faintly, embers barely alive. A pot of water sat frozen at the edges. Marta set the shotgun on the table but kept a hand near it. Put the little one by the fire. Nora laid Owen down, peeling back the blankets. His skin was pale, lips tinged blue. She rubbed his chest with both hands, fighting panic. Please, Owen, please. Marta knelt beside her, pulling a tin of cream from under a loose board, warming it between her palms. You brought him through a devil's storm, girl. On Christmas week, too. She crossed herself. You must have angels walking with you. Nora's voice broke. I don't know if they stayed. Caleb moved to the corner, silently repairing the door he'd broken. He stacked boards, braced them with rope, tied knots that looked impossible for frozen fingers. He didn't ask permission. He didn't ask anything. Marta eyed him. You talk, Sombra? He shook his head once. She snorted. Men who don't talk usually lie less, but they bleed more. Nora almost smiled. Almost. Caleb glanced at Owen again. Nora saw the flicker in his eyes. Not pity. Assessment. a man measuring distance between life and death. He pointed to the stove, then to the chimney. Then he drew a line in the air with his thumb, downward. Smoke meant danger. Nora's stomach knotted. "They'll see," Caleb nodded. Marta muttered a curse in Spanish. "Then hurry, drink this." She shoved a clay cup of boiled spruce toward Nora. "You'll collapse before the boy does." Nora gulped it. The heat burned her throat. "Thank you, Lord. Just one more hour of strength. 1 hour." A knock hammered the door. Not gentle, not uncertain. The kind of knock that belongs to men who carry badges, or think they're God when they wear one. Owen stirred, whimpering. Nora's whole body locked. Caleb reached her before she realized he'd moved, one finger pressing to his lips. Quiet. Marta grabbed the shotgun, whispering, "Dios nos guarde." A voice outside said calmly, "Open up, ma'am. Sheriff's orders. We're searching for a girl and a baby." Caleb stepped toward the door, shadow tall against the firelight. Nora's heart fell into her stomach. Lord, don't let him surrender. He didn't. He reached for the rope at his belt, tightened it once around his palm. Then he looked at her, steady, absolute, and she knew. The silent drifter wasn't leaving. Not now. Not in this storm. Not with her and the child inside. And outside, boots crunched in the snow. More than one pair. More than two. The storm had not hidden their trail as well as she prayed. The knocking stopped. Silence stretched thin over the room. Thin enough that Nora could hear Owen's shallow breaths hitting the blanket like tiny taps of a dying clock. Then a glove brushed the frosted window. Caleb's posture shifted an inch. Only an inch. But it felt like the whole room tipped. The drifter didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't crouch. He simply placed one hand, flat, firm, on the doorframe, bracing for something Nora couldn't see. A man's voice cut through the storm. Smooth, controlled. "Ma'am, Sheriff Voss requests entry. Routine welfare inspection." Marta hissed between her teeth. "Welfare, my foot. Devil's been using that word all year." She set the shotgun behind a crate, angled so she could reach it fast. "Don't move, mija." But Nora couldn't stop shaking. Lord, shield us. Bootsteps crunched outside. More of them. A lantern washed amber light through the cracks. Caleb motioned with 2 fingers, sharp, urgent. "Hide." Nora slid behind the stacked crates, pulling Owen to her chest, rope still biting her ribs. The child whimpered. She pressed his face to her coat. "Shh, shh." Her whisper felt like a prayer cracked in half. The latch lifted. Sheriff Gideon Voss stepped inside as if he owned the storm. Snow clung to his coat like silver dust. His hat was immaculate. His smile, wrong. "Evening, Miss Soto." His tone was honey poured over steel. "Winter's hitting hard. Thought we'd check on you." Marta didn't smile. "Check somewhere else." Voss's eyes scanned the room. Not hurried, not suspicious, just measuring. Caleb didn't flinch. He stood by the stove with both hands behind his back, like a ranch hand, waiting for instructions. "Who's your guest?" Voss asked lightly. "A traveler, storm-stuck," Marta replied. "Doesn't speak." Voss's gaze slid to Caleb. Silent type. He approached with a slow, rhythmic step, as if each footfall carried a law of its own. "Sir, if you're sheltering minors or fugitives, you're obliged to answer." Caleb's jaw tensed. His silence said everything and nothing all at once. Voss reached into his coat and pulled out papers, official-looking, stamped hard enough to dent the page. He held them like a preacher holds scripture. "A guardianship order," he announced. Signed 2 days ago. Grants custody of a young boy, Owen Hale. Nora's blood froze. To my office for his welfare and proper placement. Marta's sharp breath cracked the air. Gideon, don't bring lies into my house. Voss lifted his brows. Lies? No. Documents. Legal. Binding. He tapped the top page. There's mention of an older sister, too. Nora Hale, 17. Emotionally unstable. Dangerous to the child. Nora's throat closed. Emotionally unstable. Dangerous. He had twisted her fear into a weapon. Voss stepped farther into the room. Too close. Nora pressed her forehead to Owen's hair. Keep him quiet, Lord. Please, keep him quiet. Caleb moved, not threateningly, just one step, subtle, deliberate, placing himself between Voss and the crates where Nora hid. Voss noticed. Oh? The sheriff's voice warmed, but his eyes chilled. Protective, are you? Caleb didn't blink. Voss leaned in, studying him. I've seen you somewhere. Caleb's shoulders stiffened. Nora saw it, barely, but enough to know the recognition cut deep. Voss smiled like a man tightening a noose. You're not local, but I never forget a face. Outside, a deputy called. Sheriff, drag marks out back? Nora's heart stopped. Voss stepped back, all politeness gone. Miss Soto, step aside. Marta didn't move. You touch anything in my home without cause, I'll... Voss cut her off. Your cooperation keeps this peaceful. He waved a hand. 2 deputies entered, snow spilling in behind them. One was young, Luke Banner, face pale, eyes uneasy. Check the crates, Voss ordered. Luke hesitated. Just a second. A heartbeat. His gaze flickered toward where Nora hid, then toward Caleb. Something like conflict twisted inside him. Caleb saw it. Nora saw Caleb see it. Luke didn't lift his rifle. Instead, he tapped his boot twice on the wooden floor. Quiet, coded. A warning. Nora sucked in a breath. He knows. He's helping us. But why? Why him? A brittle cough escaped Owen. Voss turned. Caleb moved so fast the lantern flame jumped, his boot scraping the floor like a blade pulled from a sheath. He dropped a metal cup deliberately. It clattered loud enough to drown Owen's sound. Voss snapped toward him. Careful, friend. Caleb spread his hands. Harmless. Empty. Luke seized the moment. Sheriff, Prince lead to the ridge. Might lose him if we wait. Voss considered. Fine. Spread out. I'll finish here. Luke didn't leave. His voice lowered to almost nothing. Sir, storm's picking up. Roads'll ice. Voss's jaw ticked. Outside. Now. Luke stepped out, but his eyes lingered on Caleb, an unspoken plea. Don't let him win. Voss approached the crates. Nora held Owen so tight she feared she'd smother him. Lord, shield us. Voss touched the top crate, paused. A knock of wind hit the wall, rattling the shutters. A sign cross fell from Marta's shelf, clattering to the floor with a sharp snap. The sheriff's eyes flicked toward it. Caleb acted. He shifted his stance, knocking the poker beside the stove with the edge of his boot. It rang against the iron, sharp enough to grab every pair of eyes, sharp enough to buy seconds. Seconds were everything. Nora didn't breathe. After a long, cold moment, Voss turned away. For now, he murmured, I'll assume your hospitality is clean. His smile cut the room open. But I'll be back. Children don't survive long in storms. He tapped the doorframe twice, like a promise or a threat. Then he left. Snow swallowed the footsteps until only the wind remained, howling like something that wanted a life. Nora sagged. Owen stirred weakly. Merry Christmas. Lord, hold us steady, she thought. We're not out yet. Caleb exhaled once. quiet as a prayer broken in half, and the rope around Nora's waist felt suddenly tighter, as if the storm itself had grabbed the other end. The moment Voss vanished into the white, Caleb moved fast. Faster than Nora had seen any man move who wasn't running from a bullet. He lifted the fallen sign, set it neatly on Marta's shelf, then checked the window slit without sound. His breath didn't shake. Hers did. Outside, the deputies fanned out, their lanterns bobbing through the storm like hungry, wandering stars. Marta pressed a hand over her crucifix. "This won't hold long, Mija. They'll be back." Nora gathered Owen close. His whimpers had grown softer, too soft. His skin was warm in the wrong way. Fever. God, not now. Please, not now. Caleb turned from the window, his eyes locked on the baby. Something inside him hardened. Not cold, not cruel, but resolved, like steel being cooled in snow. He tapped Nora's sleeve, pointed to the back wall. An exit, a small one, half buried in drifts. No door, just a gap leading into blackness. Nora shook her head violently. "It's too exposed. They'll see." Caleb pressed a finger to his lips. Then he did something she didn't expect. He handed her his rope. Not the sled rope, not the piece tied to Owen. His rope, the one looped at his belt, braided in 3 muted colors, worn smooth from years of trail and trouble. Men like him don't part with rope. Ever. "What are you doing?" Nora whispered. He didn't answer. He just knelt, tied the rope around her waist with a knot so sure, so practiced. She felt the weight of every life he'd saved, or failed to save, threaded into it. Marta's face drained of color. "Sombra. Don't." Caleb rose and stepped toward the front door. "No." The word tore out of Nora's throat before she could stop it. "No. Don't go out there. They'll kill you." Caleb turned his head slightly, just enough so she could see his eyes beneath the brim. There was no fear in them, no bravado either. Just a quiet acceptance, the kind a man carries when he's been living on borrowed time. "I can't let you be taken," she realized. "He's choosing the storm over us." Marta reached for him. Foolish man. Silent doesn't mean disposable. But Caleb only dipped his head once. A thank you, a farewell, or a prayer. Nora couldn't tell. He opened the door. Wind knifed through the room, snuffing half the fire. Snow swirled around his silhouette, cloaking him in pale light. For a heartbeat, he looked like a figure carved out of winter and silence. A deputy shouted, "There! Someone's coming out!" Lantern beams converged, slicing through the dark like judgment. Nora's heart collapsed inside her chest. "Please, Lord, don't let them hang him." Caleb raised both hands, not high, not dramatic, just enough to say, "I'm alone," not enough to say they're not inside. Voss strode toward him, boots cracking ice with each step. "Well now," he drawled, "the quiet stranger. Or should I say, the one hiding something?" Caleb didn't blink. Voss circled him like a wolf, circling prey. "Funny thing, I've seen your face in wanted posters. Or maybe it was court records. Tell me, are you protecting the girl? Or using her as bait?" Caleb stayed silent. That was answer enough. Voss smiled. "Boys, cuff him." Deputies grabbed Caleb's arms. He didn't fight. He didn't flinch as metal closed around his wrists. Snow gathered on his hat brim, catching faint glimmers of lantern light. Inside the cabin, Nora choked on a sob she couldn't release. "He's given himself up for us." Marta grabbed her shoulders. "Go, Mija, before he dies for nothing." Nora clutched Owen tighter, the rope Caleb tied digging deep into her skin like a vow she hadn't agreed to, but now had to honor. Outside, Voss mounted his horse. You there? Check the back of the station. Someone dragged something through the snow. Could be our fugitives. Panic flooded Nora's limbs. Caleb looked toward the cabin then, just once. A glance so small she almost missed it. A glance that said, "Run. Now." She ducked toward the back wall, boots slipping on the icy floor. Marta kicked aside crates, exposing the narrow crawl space. Cold air blasted her face. The rope around her waist felt like the last thread connecting her to sanity. Behind her, Voss barked, "Move out! Keep eyes sharp! The storm hides nothing from God!" Nora whispered, "Lord, guide us," and crawled into the night. Caleb didn't look back again. He didn't have to. He'd already traded himself for them. Snow clawed at her face as Nora crawled out from the way station's back wall, dragging Owen with both arms locked tight around him. The rope Caleb tied at her waist burned through her coat with every movement, raw, biting, alive with fear. Behind her, muffled voices rose. Metal clanged. A horse snorted. Someone cursed at the wind. Caleb was buying their minutes, maybe buying their lives. Lord, don't let him fall because of us. She staggered upright and ran, half running, half sliding, toward the dark silhouette on the hill. A building, squared, still standing, with a cross leaning crooked on its roofline. The old hillside church. Owen whimpered. His breath came shallow, uneven, like a candle fighting its last inch of wick. "Hold on," she whispered, voice cracking. "Please, hold on." The door was locked. Frost sealed the hinges. Nora pounded once, too softly to be heard by anyone except the God she begged. She scanned the frame, found a narrow crack, and shoved her fingers into it. Nothing. She looped the rope Caleb gave her around the handle, pulled backward with everything left in her legs. The wood groaned. Nails creaked like old bones. She pulled again, harder, until the edge shuddered loose with a final snap. She fell through the doorway, half dragging the baby, half collapsing herself. Inside, the air was warmer but stale. A single candle stub flickered in a wall niche, untouched since last service, maybe last Christmas. Owen whimpered again. "Hush, mijo. Hush." Her voice trembled, stealing the words she once heard Marta use. Maybe comfort had its own language. She set him near the back pew, rubbing his arms, tapping life into limbs already drifting cold. His eyelids fluttered. Fear stabbed her heart so sharply she gasped. "Don't take him, Lord. Not tonight. Not when angels were said to walk the earth." She scanned the church for shelter, for heat, for anything. Her gaze caught on the pulpit. A ledger sat half open, dust on its spine, ribbon marking a page worn thin from repeated touch. Nora approached, fingers trembling. Names, land claims, survey lists, dates, and then Clearwater Fork, Hale, OH. Her breath froze in her chest. There it was. Proof they weren't lying. Proof someone else had written her little brother into a claim as if he were property. She tore the marked page free. It ripped jaggedly, like bone tearing from sinew. She folded it, shoved it into Owen's blanket, right against his chest. Heavy boots stamped outside. She whipped around. Shadows passed across the stained glass window, red and gold flickers of lantern light. Deputies. This quickly. They must have split around the ridge. Her pulse pounded so loud it felt like thunder cracking open her ribs. She darted to the small storage door behind the altar. Locked. The rope at her waist swung loose. Caleb's knot. Nora pressed the knot into the crack. Tightened, pulled downward. The latch snapped. The door swung open into darkness. She hurried inside, pulling Owen after her. She pushed sacks of flour against the door, shivering with each echo of footsteps outside. Then the church door opened. She froze. A heavy shuffle, a cough, a muttered prayer. Not Voss. A lantern glowed through the crack below the storage door, casting a warm stripe across the floorboards. A figure knelt. She recognized the voice instantly. Reverend Asa Pike. Lord, guide me. Let these walls be refuge tonight. Nora's knees buckled. Relief nearly drowned her. But Pike's next words carved fear into her again. Sheriff Voss is on the ridge. Says a girl and a babe are lost in the storm. God help them if he finds them first. Owen whimpered, too loud. Pike froze. Who's there? Nora pressed a trembling hand over Owen's mouth. Please, she whispered through the door. Don't call them. Pike didn't speak for a full minute. Then, softly, come out, child. Let me see him. She eased the door open just enough. Pike held his lantern low, shadows deepening the lines on his weather-torn face. His eyes softened when he saw the baby. Dear Lord, he murmured, this child needs warmth. He helped her to the fire pit behind the choir rail. No questions, no accusations, just action, the kind that comes from men who've buried too many innocents. He stoked embers, spread blankets, lifted Owen with hands that shook only from age, not fear. Your boy is burning up. Fever's taken him fast. He's not mine, Nora whispered. He's all I have. Pike nodded once, as if that explained everything. Maybe it did. A crash sounded outside, hoofbeats, voices calling. Sheriff, tracks lead toward the church. Nora's heart fractured. No, please. Pike blew out the lantern instantly. Shadows swallowed them whole. Down, he whispered, and pray. He pressed a key into her palm, a cold, iron shape. Basement hatch, under the rug. Go. Quiet. Nora slid the rug aside with shaking hands, lifted the wooden square, and descended into the black. Pike lowered Owen to her, then the lantern, then closed the hatch. Darkness sealed around her. She held Owen tight. His breath rattled weakly. Please, Lord, don't take him. I'm begging you. Above her, boots hammered across the chapel's floor. Doors slammed, men shouted, and somewhere out in the storm, Caleb was still in chains. The cell was barely a room. 4 stone walls, 1 iron door, and a single slit of winter moonlight cutting across the floor, like a blade left to rust. Caleb sat in the corner, wrists bruised where the cuffs bit deep. Snowmelt dripped from his coat in slow, steady beats. He hadn't said a word since they dragged him in. He wouldn't. Some vows are made in blood, others are made in graves, and I still owe that grave an answer, he thought. Just once, before burying it again. Bootsteps approached. Sheriff Gideon Voss appeared behind the bars, lantern raised. The golden light made his smile look carved rather than living. Well now, Voss murmured, the silent stranger, or should I call you by your real name? He waited, savoring the silence. Caleb didn't look up. Voss swung a length of new rope, clean, pale, braided tight, a noose. Know what this is? He asked, voice gentle as poison. Of course you do. Men like you always do. Caleb's jaw clenched, a tremor in the left side where an old scar tugged. Voss chuckled softly. You protected that girl. Strange thing, loyalty, especially when the person you're loyal to isn't yours to save. Caleb lifted his eyes at that. Slow, deliberate. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't rage. Just refusal. Refusal to give Voss the satisfaction of being right. Voss leaned in, rope swaying. You want to help her? Bring her in. Bring me the baby. You're on the wrong side of the law, friend. But I'm a merciful man. I can let you walk out of here alive. Caleb blinked once. Voss smiled wider. That's a yes? Caleb shook his head. Voss's smile vanished. You think this storm will hide her forever? Paperwork doesn't melt. Signatures don't vanish. I own that child. And if she thinks dragging him across God's snow will change the law, she hasn't met the law yet. Caleb breathed out slowly. The air in the cell tasted like iron. Voss slammed the bars with the noose. Tell me where she is. Caleb didn't move. Voss leaned closer. Tell me, before the storm buries her body and I have nothing left to collect. Caleb lowered his gaze to the rope in the sheriff's hand. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Silence can be a blade when it's held by the right man. Voss straightened. Very well. We'll find her without you. And when we do, he dragged a finger along the rope. You'll watch. He left the lantern burning just out of reach, taunting, then strode out. The door shut. Darkness reclaimed the cell. Caleb leaned back against the wall, the cold biting through his coat. His breath fogged in the thin moonlight. He closed his eyes for one heartbeat. Just one. A voice whispered outside the door. Get up. Quiet. Caleb opened his eyes. Deputy Luke Banner slid inside, shoulders tight with fear, jaw tight with something else. He set a tin plate on the ground. Bread, a tin cup, a knife too small to be a weapon but sharp enough to matter if held right. You didn't get this from me, Luke muttered. Eat fast. Caleb didn't reach for the food. His attention locked on the knife half hidden beneath the crust. Luke swallowed hard. I'm not supposed to, but I heard the boy crying earlier. Sheriff doesn't care if he freezes. The deputy's voice cracked. He's twisting the law. Those papers aren't right. Caleb met his gaze. Luke lowered himself to a crouch, hands trembling. I saw the signatures. They're forged. Sheriff's been paid off by the railroad. Land, water rights, the whole valley. The Hale baby gives him leverage. He exhaled sharply. God forgive me, I didn't know till now. Caleb dipped his chin, acknowledging, not forgiving. Luke's eyes flicked to the cuffs. I can get you out, but if you go after him, if you shoot him, I can't protect you. Caleb shook his head. Luke frowned. You're not going to kill him? Caleb pointed to the sky through the slit window. Snow spiraled past like falling ghosts. Then he pressed a hand to his own throat, scarred, then to his heart. Luke understood. Justice, not vengeance. A testimony spoken without words. Luke unlocked the cuffs. Metal dropped to the floor, dull and heavy. Basement doors unguarded, the deputy whispered. Once you're out, head for the ridge. That storm's covering tracks faster than we can follow. Caleb lifted the small knife, sliding it into his sleeve. The tile under him felt like frozen bone. Luke hesitated at the door. If you find her, tell her not all lawmen are devils. Caleb paused, then touched 2 fingers to his hat brim. A silent vow. Maybe even respect. Luke vanished down the hall. Caleb stood in the cell alone, free but not saved. The storm howled through the stone slit, carrying a sound he couldn't place. Like a child's cry dragged thin by wind. He moved, out the door, down the steps, into the dark. The rope burn on his wrists throbbed hot. I won't let that child fall, he thought. One of the few thoughts he'd let himself claim as prayer. And somewhere above the ridge, lanterns flickered near the old church. Hunting, snow hammered the roof of the old frontier chapel like God himself was knocking. The boards shook. Dust sifted down from the rafters. Nora pressed her back to the stone foundation as she eased Owen deeper into the crawl space beneath the altar. The baby whimpered once. She pressed a gloved finger to his lips. "Please, not now," she whispered. Her breath fogged in the dim light of the single candle she dared to keep burning. The flame trembled, as if the storm outside could snuff it even through walls 3 logs thick. Through a crack in the floorboards, she saw boots. A man's boots. Not heavy enough for a deputy. Not sharp enough for steel-spurred authority. Reverend Asa Pike knelt beside the altar, lips moving in quiet prayer. "Lord," he murmured, "in this night of your birth, keep all small things that wander cold roads." Nora froze. He knew. He didn't look down. Didn't acknowledge her hiding place. Just raised his hand and made the sign of the cross in the air. Slow, deliberate, pointed toward the crawl space she hid in. Permission or protection. She couldn't tell. Outside, hooves ground to a halt. Lanterns swung. A cold dread slid down her spine. Sheriff Gideon Voss. Even the storm seemed to hush for him. The chapel door creaked open without knocking. "Evening, Reverend," Voss called, stepping inside like he owned every inch of the valley. Snow brushed off his coat as he approached the altar. "Hell of a night to be praying alone." Pike smiled faintly. "I'm not alone, Sheriff. God keeps the night watch, same as any man." Voss chuckled. "God doesn't sign guardianship papers." He walked slowly, boots echoing, a predator tracing familiar paths. Below the floorboards, Nora held Owen to her chest, feeling the fever heat pulsing through his blanket. His breathing hitched. "Please, Lord. I can't lose him. Not on Christmas night." Voss inspected the chapel like a man searching for cracks in a confession. He brushed dust from a pew, ran a thumb across candle wax, tapped a hymn book like checking for hollow wood. "You've got footprints outside," he noted. "Small ones." Pike didn't blink. "Children visit often, seeking warmth." "In a blizzard?" Voss's smile sharpened. "Seems unlikely." Pike didn't answer. Silence made his faith obvious. Voss leaned against the altar, fingers drumming. "I'm chasing a girl, Reverend. Frail little thing. And her baby brother. They're in danger. Need the law's protection." Below, Nora's pulse hammered so loudly she feared he could hear it through the floor. Voss bent down. Not enough to see her, but enough to hear between boards. Owen coughed. Nora clamped her hand over his mouth, heart clawing against her ribs. Pike moved instantly. He kicked over a copper basin near the door. Water sloshed everywhere, the clang loud enough to pull Voss's attention away. "Clumsy of me," Pike muttered. "Arthritis is the devil's own mischief." Voss stared at him for a too long moment, then straightened. "Reverend, if you see her, you tell me. The law doesn't take kindly to defiance." Pike smiled thinly. "Neither does the Lord." Voss's jaw tightened. He hated being answered with scripture. He stepped back into the storm, slamming the chapel door behind him. Nora's legs finally gave out. She slumped beside Owen, whispering a prayer that nearly tore her throat. Pike knelt again, this time whispering low, angled to the crawl space. "Child, get up here. Quickly, before he thinks to look twice." Nora hesitated, then pushed Owen toward the opening. Pike's weathered hands reached through, lifting the baby with a care she hadn't seen in weeks. She followed, boots scraping stone as she crawled out. "You can't stay," Pike murmured. "The sheriff will return with men." "Where do we go?" she asked, voice cracking. Pike unlocked a trap door beneath the organ and motioned. My cellar. Old mission records down there and... He hesitated. Proof Voss can't risk you showing. Nora froze. The same kind of proof that got her father killed. Pike lit a lantern and held it out. Take it. God gave light before he gave law. Her throat tightened. Reverend, if he finds out you helped us, then he finds out. Pike smiled sadly. A shepherd doesn't run when wolves circle. Nora wanted to cry. She hadn't cried since the night her world split open. Above them, wind howled, shaking the stained glass window until the panels rattled like bones. Pike pressed a hand to her shoulder. Have faith, child. She swallowed. I'm trying. I'm trying so hard, she told herself. She descended into the cellar darkness with Owen warm and burning in her arms. Pike shut the trap door. The last thing Nora heard before the latch clicked was the sound of the Reverend beginning a hymn, soft, steady, trembling with age. While outside, the sheriff's lanterns circled back through the snow. Hunting. The jail door wasn't built to hold a man like Caleb Rourke. Not in a storm like this. Not when a child's breath hung by threads. He worked the small knife Luke had slipped him. Slow, steady, careful not to make metal sing. The lock clicked once, twice. On the third click, it surrendered. The wind hit him as he stepped into the alley. Hard, bitter. Snow lashed sideways. The whole town looked blurred, like God had painted it with shaking hands. He could slip away now, over the ridge, into the dark. Disappear like men with his past were meant to. But lanterns glowed on the hill by the chapel. A baby's cry lived in his memory like a wound. Caleb tightened his coat and moved. Not fast, not reckless, just inevitable. He slid behind the livery as deputies stomped past, lanterns bobbing like hungry spirits, their voices cut through the storm. Sheriff wants the church searched again. He swears he heard something below the altar. Caleb's blood iced. He angled toward the back of the chapel, boots silent in the rising drifts. The snow softened everything except the cold. From the window slid above, he saw Reverend Pike pacing, stalling, talking loudly to buy time. Caleb's jaw flexed. That old man shouldn't have been fighting the storm alone. He reached into his coat, pulled out his rope, the same three-colored braid he'd never parted with. A rope that had once saved him, a rope that had once damned him. Tonight, it would do both. A deputy rounded the corner. Caleb grabbed him before sound could escape, pulled him into the shadow between cemetery stones. A swift twist of rope, not to choke, only to silence. Then he eased the man to his knees and tied him to the fence. No blood, no broken bones, just a warning. Storm justice. Inside the cellar, Nora rocked Owen, keeping him awake with soft touches. Fever shimmered off him like heat from a forge. Stay with me, Owen. Please stay, she whispered. Her breath fogged in the lantern light. She listened through the floor. Footsteps, voices, creaking boards. Voss again, always Voss. Her heart wouldn't slow. Lord, don't let him find us. Not here. Not tonight. Pike faced the sheriff at the altar. The Reverend's voice stayed calm. You've searched already. Voss smiled tightly. Storm changes things. Tracks fill, sounds carry, sins get revealed. He pressed a palm against the altar, leaned in close. Tell me again, Reverend, he whispered. You alone here? Pike didn't blink. God keeps me company. Voss's smile turned cold. Then let him open the floor for you. He stepped back, gestured to a deputy. Lift the boards. The deputy jammed a crowbar into the seams. Stopped, Behind him, something slipped in the wind. Metal clanged. Voss spun toward the sound, but Caleb was already gone. A shadow melting behind the steeple. Caleb circled the chapel's far wall, studying the guards. 2 by the main door, 1 near the graveyard, another by the pastor's shed. He crouched, feeling the ground beneath his gloves. Hard-packed snow, ice crust, drifts waist-deep where the wind curled. Perfect. He tied his rope low between 2 tombstones. Tight, invisible under fresh snow. Storm by storm, he'd learned one truth. Wind kills faster than bullets, if you're smart enough to guide it. He stepped away, then whistled. Soft, barely a note. A horse jerked its head. Another snorted. The nearest deputy turned. His boot hooked the rope. He pitched forward, lantern flying. Flame burst against snow, sending sparks and panic skyward. "Man down!" 2 deputies rushed to him. Voss cursed. "Idiots! Spread out!" Chaos, confusion, movement everywhere except where it mattered. Caleb slipped into the chapel's side door. Pike startled when the shadow appeared beside him. Caleb raised a finger to his lips. Pike exhaled a prayer. "Thank God." Caleb didn't answer. He pointed to the floor. Pike nodded once and stepped aside. Caleb knelt, found the trap door latch by touch, and tapped twice. Signal. Below, Nora jerked awake. She almost cried out. Then she heard the 3rd tap. Soft, rhythmic, the same pattern he'd used on the trail when asking if Owen breathed. She lifted the door. Caleb reached down. She stared up at him, snow glittering in his hair like broken stars. A man who should have run. A man who didn't. "Why? Why did you come back?" she whispered. He didn't speak. He just held out his rope, a length he'd cut from the main coil, frayed at the edge, a binding, a promise, a way out. She placed Owen in his arms before she even realized she'd moved. Caleb held the baby against his chest, steady as stone. The floorboards groaned above them. Heavy boots, angry, multiplied by the storm's echo. Nora felt each step like a fist against her spine. Caleb lifted Owen tighter against his chest, shielding the baby's burning skin from the cold funneling down the trap door. His breath fogged the dark. His jaw locked. Reverend Pike pushed them toward the back wall. "Go, through the coal chute." Nora hesitated. "Reverend." "No time, child." He pressed his Bible into her free hand. "If I fall, let the word carry you farther than I can." A sound cracked above them. Wood splitting, metal prying. Voss had found the floorboards. Caleb shoved the chute door open with one shoulder, snow pouring in like a burial shroud. He looked to Nora, eyes asking the only question that mattered. "Are you ready?" She wasn't, but she nodded anyway. Then the chapel above exploded in noise. "Reverend, move aside!" a deputy shouted. Pike stood in front of the altar, spine straight as cedar. "This is God's house." Voss smiled like a man who believed he outranked God. Then he can watch what happens next. He shoved Pike aside. Hard. The Reverend hit the pew and went down. Nora's breath seized. She almost clawed her way back up the chute. Caleb caught her wrist, shook his head once. Not yet. Voss knelt over the floorboards listening. Owen coughed, weak, sharp, a cry cut in half. Voss's eyes lit with triumph. "There you are!" He slammed the crowbar down. The board cracked open, snow blowing through the gap. Lantern light poured into the cellar like a blade of gold. Pike staggered to his feet, grabbed the first thing he could, an iron candle stand, and swung. It smashed into Voss's shoulder. The sheriff roared. A gunshot split the air. Nora screamed without sound. Pike collapsed, hand pressed to his ribs, blood blooming through his shirt. Caleb went rigid. Something inside him snapped. Not recklessness, not rage, but purpose sharpened to a knife's point. He pushed Nora through the chute. She grabbed him. "No, Caleb!" He touched 2 fingers to his hat brim, a promise to follow. Then he turned back toward the light. Up in the chapel, snow swirled through the broken boards as Voss reloaded. "Stubborn old man," he muttered. "Should have stayed with your hymns." Caleb rose from the cellar like a shadow pulled upright by the storm. Voss froze. "So you're alive?" He smirked. "Good. I wanted you breathing when the noose—" Caleb fired into the floor beside Voss's boot. The report cracked like thunder in the cramped chapel. The blast flung snow and splinters high. Not a killing shot. A warning. The first bullet he'd fired in years. Voss blinked, thrown off balance. "You missed." Caleb chambered another round. Slow, deliberate. Voss understood then. This was a man who didn't miss. He lunged behind a pew. "Get him!" The deputies rushed forward. Caleb moved faster. He grabbed the fallen pew, used it as cover, and fired again. Not at flesh, but at lanterns lining the wall. Glass shattered, oil splashed. Flames hissed out on impact, plunging half the chapel into shadows. Confusion, panic, perfect. Caleb vaulted the broken altar rail and ran for Pike. The Reverend clutched his side, breath ragged. "It's not mortal yet," he murmured, forcing a smile. "God's not done with me tonight." Caleb lifted him, one arm under the Reverend's shoulders. Pike's weight sagged, but his faith did not. "Go," Pike whispered. "Find her." Caleb nodded. Deputies charged. He ducked low, slid across the icy floor, and grabbed Pike's topcoat from the pew. He threw it into the air, drawing gunfire toward fluttering fabric. He slipped through the side door while bullets tore holes in empty wool. Outside, the blizzard roared. Snow stung like sand. Lanterns blurred in the whiteout. Nora crawled from the chute, boots sinking deep as she dragged Owen into the cemetery's lee side. Stones rose like crooked guardians around her. She heard the gunfire. One shot, then another, then nothing. Her heart failed her. "Lord, please." She pressed Owen to her chest and began to climb the ridge, alone, because she couldn't lose Caleb too. Her foot slid. She caught herself on a gravestone. The rope around her waist tightened, pulling her off balance. She gasped. It wasn't her rope. It was Caleb's. Left knotted around her from earlier. A lifeline, a direction, a promise. She followed it. Caleb burst from the chapel just as Nora reached the crest. Their eyes met across the cemetery, hers wild with fear, his steady with purpose. She mouthed, "Pike." He touched his heart, then pointed back toward the church, alive but bleeding. Voices rose behind him. Voss was coming. Caleb jerked his head toward the ridge trail. Nora ran. He followed. Snow closed behind them like a curtain, hiding them again. But not for long. Hunting would resume. It always did. The storm thinned at dawn, but only enough to show how much danger waited beneath it. The ridge trail curved over open white, a long exposed spine where any shadow could be hunted. Nora staggered through the drifts, Owen burning in her arms. Caleb stayed behind her, scanning the tree line, hearing things before they existed. He tapped her shoulder, twice. A warning. Voices rose from below. Deputies. Close. Nora clutched the Bible Pike had shoved into her hands. Inside it, hidden between thin pages, was the folded sheet taken from the church archive. The real Clearwater record. proof Voss would kill to destroy. Owen whimpered. Caleb moved in front of them, raising a gloved fist. Stop. Through the storm haze, 3 riders pushed up the trail. Luke Banner led them, face torn by conflict. Behind him, 2 deputies with rifles drawn. Caleb's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, silent, the storm swirling behind him like a cloak. Luke saw him first. "Don't," he warned the deputies, voice shaking. "He's carrying a child." The deputies didn't lower their guns. "Nora," Luke called out, "come out where I can see you." She stepped into view, clutching Owen tight against her coat. Luke's eyes softened. Relief, fear, regret. "He's burning up. He needs a doctor. We can get him help in town." "No," Nora whispered. The deputies dismounted, spreading wide to box them in. One lifted a coil of rope, a noose already tied. Caleb's shoulders rolled back a fraction, like a man preparing to break a vow. Nora felt her breath splinter. "Luke," she tried. "Please." Luke swallowed hard. "Sheriff's orders. He'll be here any minute." The words carried an ache, not threat, grief. Hoofbeats rose from the canyon mouth. Slow, certain. Sheriff Gideon Voss. He emerged through the thinning snow with the confidence of a man who believed God himself rode behind him. "Well," Voss said lightly, "found my fugitives and my witness." Caleb shifted to place his body between Voss and the baby. Voss dismounted, brushing frost from his coat. "Luke, fetch the document." Luke froze. Voss's eyes narrowed. "You heard me." Luke took a step. Nora backed up. The ridge swallowed her heel. Voss raised a hand. "Stop." Everyone froze. The sheriff smiled at her gently, too gently. "Miss Hale, hand me the Clearwater paper. And the child. And no one else has to bleed in this holy season." Nora stared at him. Snow stung her eyes. The world blurred. Luke stepped forward, palms out. "Nora, please. He'll shoot if you don't—" His voice cracked. Voss drew his pistol and pressed it to Luke's rib. "Let's make this simple," Voss said. "Your friend here dies unless you give me the paper." Luke didn't beg. He just closed his eyes. Nora's nails dug into the Bible cover so hard the leather tore. Owen whimpered weakly. Caleb touched her elbow, a silent plea. "Don't give him what he wants." "But—" Nora's gaze fell on Luke, the man who had risked his badge, his life to help them. A good man trapped in bad law. "Lord, what do you want of me now?" Caleb shook his head slowly. Nora shook hers back. "No, not to him, to fate." She reached into the Bible. Caleb grabbed her wrist. She looked into his eyes, clear, sharp, storm-lit, and whispered so only he could hear. "He saved us." Caleb's face changed. A flicker, a wound reopening. Voss cocked the gun. Nora pulled out the document, the only copy proving Voss's forgery, the only shield she had left. The wind almost tore it from her hand. "Stop!" Luke gasped. "Nora, don't!" But she stepped forward and held it out. Voss snatched it with the greed of a drowning man grasping land. The deputies lowered their rifles. Luke sank to his knees. Caleb stood still, too still. Snow drifted through the silence like ashes. "You made the right choice," Voss said soothingly. "Now hand me the boy." Caleb moved. Not violent, not wild, just final. "No." The word broke the air like a crack in stone. Nora's breath left her chest. It was the first word she'd ever heard him speak. Even Voss flinched. So the mute talks. Caleb stepped forward, coat flaring with the wind. "You're not touching them." The deputies raised rifles again. Luke forced himself upright. "Sheriff, don't do this. Caleb will—" But Voss shoved him aside. Bind them, all three. The moment snapped. Caleb grabbed Nora's hand and pulled her backward toward the ridge edge. Voss shouted, "Don't let them move!" Shots ripped through the wind. Snow exploded around their boots. Caleb shielded Nora and Owen with his body as they scrambled down the blind slope behind the ridge, an avalanche of snow swallowing their tracks as fast as they made them. Voss screamed orders into the storm, but the storm didn't answer him. It answered them. Caleb caught Nora's waist before she slipped, his breath harsh, his voice gone again, but one word still echoed inside her. No. A refusal. A vow. A beginning. And below them, the canyon waited, white mouth open, hungry for the next battle. The gorge opened beneath them like a wound in the earth. White walls, sheer drops, wind slicing through its throat with a voice older than scripture. Caleb pulled Nora down behind a jut of ice, shielding Owen from the gusts that wanted to steal his breath. Shots cracked above the ridge. Voss's men scrambled after them, their lanterns flickering like angry stars. Nora tightened her grip on Owen. "Caleb, where do we go?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. He tied one end of his rope around a rock outcrop, hands steady despite the storm clawing at his coat. He wrapped the other end around Nora's waist. Tight, firm, the knot a signature no other man in the valley could tie. Nora swallowed. "Will this hold?" Caleb looked at her, really looked, and nodded once. Then he wrapped a second piece of rope around Luke's chest. The deputy shook with cold and shame in equal measure. "I'm sorry," Luke whispered. "I shouldn't have led them to you." Caleb placed a hand on his shoulder. Forgiveness, given without words. But the wind carried a new sound. Hoofbeats. Voss stood at the ridge above them, silhouetted against a rising pale sun. Snow spun around him like falling ashes. His horse snorted, spooked by the height. "End of the trail," Voss called, voice too calm. "Hand over the boy, Rourke, and the girl. You give me that, and I'll leave one of you alive to see spring." Caleb stepped forward, placing his body between Voss and the others. "No," he said, his second word in years. It hit Voss harder than any bullet. "So the mute chooses now." The sheriff pulled the rope coiled at his saddle horn, jet black, newly waxed, a noose already set. "Good. I've got something special for men who think silence makes them saints." He tossed the noose forward. It landed near Nora's boots. Luke stiffened. "Sheriff, don't." "Shut your mouth, son." Voss dug his spurs into the snowbank and aimed his pistol. "Girl first." Nora backed up instinctively, and her heel slid over the edge. Caleb lunged, grabbing her coat before gravity did. She clutched Owen tighter, heart slamming so hard she couldn't feel the cold anymore. Voss laughed softly. "Look at that. The mighty drifter saving a girl who should have died in the storm." He pointed the pistol at Owen. Nora screamed without sound. Caleb stepped forward, hands raised. "Stop." His voice cracked like a branch breaking under ice. Voss's smile widened. "Trade, then? You for them?" Caleb nodded. Nora jerked his arm. "No, Caleb, don't." But he was already untying the knot at her waist, loosening the rope until she understood. He meant to give himself up. Voss twirled the black noose lazily. "Come on, then. Let's put truth around your neck." Something inside Nora broke open. Not fear, not despair. Something fiercer, like a vow made in fire. She stepped in front of Caleb. "No," she whispered. "Take me instead." Caleb froze. Voss blinked and then laughed. a cruel, delighted sound. Sweet little martyr. Luke staggered forward. "Sheriff, enough!" Voss pistol whipped him across the jaw, dropping him into the snow. Nora lifted her chin. "You want leverage? You want the valley? You take me." Voss dismounted, boots crunching on the frost. He slipped the loop over his arm and reached for her wrist. That's when Caleb moved. He flicked his knife, not at Voss, but at the rope tied to Nora's waist. The blade severed the line. The wind carried the freed rope over the cliff like a banner. Nora gasped. "Caleb!" He grabbed the frayed end and hurled it to her. Instinct took over. Her fingers closed around it. She remembered the knot Pike showed her. The saving knot. She twisted once, looped twice, pulled. The rope jerked violently. Voss lost footing. His boot skidded on the ice, right as Caleb slammed his shoulder into him. The sheriff flailed, grabbing at air, at snow, at stone, anything, but the ground betrayed him. He tumbled over the edge, but the gorge did not swallow him whole. Not yet. His hand caught a jagged outcrop. He dangled there, coat whipping like a torn banner, the black noose swinging uselessly from his wrist. Caleb stood above him, chest heaving. "Rourke!" Voss gasped. "Pull me up!" Caleb stared down at the man who had hunted a baby, burned records, bled a reverend. His hand hovered near the edge. Nora watched him, watched the storm inside him. Luke, bleeding, whispered, "Don't become him. Caleb, please." The wind howled. Caleb closed his eyes and stepped back. He didn't push Voss. He didn't save him. He walked away. The sheriff's scream was swallowed by snow and distance. A long, echoing fall, but not necessarily death. Nora clutched Owen and reached for Caleb. He let her. His fingers shook, not from cold, from choosing mercy when vengeance begged louder. The gorge rumbled beneath them, as if holding its breath. The storm broke after noon. Not suddenly, just enough for light to bleed through the gray, turning the snowfield into a sheet of pale gold. Caleb carried Owen down from the ridge, the baby limp against his chest, breath thin but steady. Nora stumbled beside him, one hand clinging to his coat, the other clutching the frayed rope he'd cut to save her. Luke Banner limped behind them, blood dried along his collar, face bruised but eyes resolute. Below, the old wagon road led back toward the settlement and toward Marta Soto's hearth. Smoke rose from her chimney, not thick, not frantic. A good sign. When Caleb pushed through the door, Marta nearly dropped the kettle. "Madre de Dios, sombra!" Then her eyes fell on Owen. "Give him here, hijo, quickly!" Caleb obeyed. Nora hovered, arms empty, suddenly shaking without the baby's heat. Marta wrapped Owen in spare quilts and hurried him toward the stove. She placed a steaming cloth near his face, coaxing breath back into lungs too small for winter. "He's burning up," Nora whispered. "We're losing him." "No, mija," Marta said, firm. "Not while I have fire." Luke braced himself against the wall, sliding down with a wince. Marta glanced at him. "You too? You lawmen fall apart faster than horses." He managed a crooked smile. "Ma'am, I'm not sure I'm law anymore." "Good," she snapped. "Law can wait, dying cannot." Caleb stood in the center of the room, snow dripping from his coat, eyes locked on Owen, still as carved stone, yet breathing like a man who'd sprinted for miles. Nora stepped closer. "Caleb, sit, please." He didn't, couldn't. Something in him refused to stop moving until the baby breathed easier. It was Dr. Ephraim Kent who finally broke the quiet. He burst through the door hauling a medical satchel and his old army camera. Marta sent word, he said breathlessly. Said you brought her a child half frozen and a man half dead. He knelt beside Owen, checked pulse, pupils, breath, then nodded, slow, relieved. He'll make it. Fever's breaking. Nora's knees gave out. She hit the floor, covering her face with both hands. Kent's gaze drifted to her wrists. The rope burn, the finger-shaped bruises. He lifted her chin gently. Miss Hale, may I take photographs? Injuries fade. Truth shouldn't. She nodded through her shaking. Kent set up the camera, lens gleaming dark and serious. This will hurt, he warned. It already does, she whispered. Click, flash, click. He captured the evidence the valley needed, the evidence Voss would have destroyed. Kent turned to Caleb next. You as well. Caleb lifted his sleeves, revealing the deep, purpled indents where shackles had torn skin. The doctor froze. Son, what did they do to you? Caleb said nothing. Kent photographed anyway. Silent medicine, silent justice. When it was done, Kent opened his satchel again. He withdrew a ledger, wrapped in oilcloth, the Reverend's handwriting across the spine. Nora gasped. Reverend Pike, he's alive? Barely, Kent said. He kept enough breath to tell me where he hid this, said it mattered more than his own ribs. He placed the ledger in Nora's hands. Clearwater Fork, original claims, the real one, the uncorrupted one. She pressed it to her chest. Caleb watched her, something softening in his eyes, though not enough to melt the scars. Kent cleared his throat. If you all mean to fight this, you'll need signatures, witnesses, names under oath. He slid a blank statement across the table. Caleb looked at it. His throat worked. Nora whispered, You don't have to. But he reached for the pencil anyway. Hand trembling, he wrote, Caleb Rourke, the name he'd fled from, the name courts could hang him with, the name he chose to reclaim for them. Nora's breath caught. Caleb, why? He lifted his gaze. For the first time, his silence wasn't armor. It was honesty. Night fell quietly. Marta spread quilts in the back room. Luke cleaned his pistol, jaw set with the courage of a man who had finally chosen a side. Owen slept, breathing evenly now, small chest rising like a promise in the firelight. Nora tucked the quilt closer around him. Caleb knelt beside her, not touching, but near enough their shadows overlapped. She whispered, almost to herself, We're not safe yet. Voss might still be alive. Caleb's eyes drifted to the window, toward the dark ridge. Snow blew across the glass in thin, cutting streaks. Somewhere in that blackness, a lone lantern flickered, moving slowly, deliberately. Nora tensed. Is that... Caleb rose, one hand on the cold windowsill, shoulders squared toward whatever came next. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The storm would return. So would the fight. But for one night, just one, this cabin held a family that winter had not claimed. And the rope that once dragged them toward death now hung quiet on the wall, tied in a careful knot. A knot that meant stay, live, together.